All right. Hi, everyone who's joining. We're seeing you slowly trickle in. We are going to start in probably 2 to 3 minutes. So just hang tight. I always like to tell attendees, feel free to use that chat button at the bottom if you guys have any questions. And we'd be happy to try to answer those at the end, or we can circle back with anyone directly. Perfect. And saw a few more of you just come in. Just give us just a few minutes. We want other people to join. And we'll probably start at 3:04, 3:05. Perfect. It looks like it's still a few more coming in, but we're just going to go ahead and start with introductions, and then we'll dive into the questions. And like I mentioned, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom or go to banks.com and look at the community page, and feel free to ask any of your questions there as well. I am Kelsey. I am the head of community partnerships at Banks, and Banks partners with companies around the world to help build out their teams. As we are moving towards our next push in our summit series, our goal is to educate the individuals in our network on the different avenues that they can grow in cannabis, of course, starting with cultivation, which is why you all are here today. We have two fantastic cultivators that are here just for a roundtable discussion to help answer any questions you have, give some feedback, advice, some of the things that they've learned throughout their career, so that hopefully as you guys journey on your next step, you're able to take some advice from them and apply it to your job search. We can go ahead and just get started with introductions. Leland, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. My name is Leland Cahalan. I'm Director of Cultivation for Qualls Cultivation. That's about it.
Perfect. John, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is John Jurkovic. I have been working in the industry for almost a decade now, cultivating for about that long as well. Working for multiple different companies throughout Colorado, and currently with a consulting company, Next Big Crop. And our parent company now is actually Trees, which is the dispensary chain in Colorado as well. So exciting things coming.
Love that. Thank you both. So let's just go ahead and get started. Let's really just get into how you got into the industry or how you got into cultivation. Sometimes they're one and the same. Sometimes the paths are a little different. Feel free to just chime in. We'd love to hear your stories.
Well, I actually got into cultivation shortly after I got out of the Army. A buddy of mine out in Oregon was looking to set up a small little closet grow. So helped him out with that. And as I was going to college out there, I got a degree in botany. And during that time, I was running medical operations out in Oregon, and just kind of did that throughout college. Didn't ever actually figure I was going to get into this industry, but after I graduated, came out to Colorado, was able to secure a position, advanced fairly quickly from an assistant grower to a head grower to a director of cultivation in about the last 8 years or so. So kind of been a snowball effect that I never even actually planned on. I thought I was going to be working for the Forest Service or something like that with my degree. But after I graduated, I had about 7 years of cultivation experience, everything from, closet grow to garage size, 10, 20 lights. Moved out here, started in a 40 light grow, took over a 100 light grow. Next thing I know, I'm running 3 different grows at the same time. So it's been a long 8 years for sure. Actually, about 15 is when I started growing, about 15 years ago. But I've been in the industry itself for about 8.
Very exciting.
Cool. Yeah, myself, I got into the industry about 9 years ago, moved out to Colorado about 10 years ago. Obviously dabbled a little bit with cannabis growing up back in Tennessee, and, obviously in the black market. I came out to Colorado not really expecting to get into the industry, had a lot of friends doing music and just kind of working out here. and thought, hey, I've got a business degree, maybe I will apply it and go, manage a dispensary, do something like that. So started working in a dispensary here and there, and met some people along the way that kind of took me under their wing and showed me kind of their ways of cultivation, and it piqued my interest. And being somebody that's always looking for new opportunities and growth, I continued to kind of go down this path of, all right, which companies are right for me, and made my way through a few different companies, working with Sweet Leaf, Native Roots Group, and now the Trees Dispensary Group. So just kind of kept pushing my way through the industry and trying to find a good fit until something seemed right and something that I liked. And cultivation really piqued my interest when it came to large scale cultivation, and really just being able to help a business improve their practices and really work with all the fun toys in the industry, automation, things like that, that really kind of piqued my interest and kept me going until this point.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you guys both come from really different backgrounds. Some would consider traditional in one sense, and the other is also traditional, depending on the eyes that you look at it through. Since you had both two completely different experiences, what would you say was the strongest and most pivotal moment in that career path to get you to where you are in your role currently?
Myself, like I said, I wasn't ever actually planning on being in this industry. Whenever I moved out here, I was actually thinking of going to CSU up in Fort Collins to get my master's or doctorate in botany, and ended up getting a assistant grow position. But within about 4 months from that, I was offered to take over as head grower and run the cultivation for the company itself. And it was probably the most pivotal because, like I said, I wasn't ever actually planning to make a career out of this at the time. But once I was put in charge of that operation, it's just rocketed since then. Haven't looked back. It's just been one opportunity after the other from that point. So I'd say that was probably the most pivotal point. It just gave me that career path and set me on the path that I've been on for the last 8 years.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I think it was a big cultural fit that just seemed to fit my lifestyle a little bit better, and seeing all the opportunity and the people that are in the industry, and just the different people that you see throughout this industry compared to other traditional industries, it felt like a better fit for me. And once I, saw the opportunity and all the entrepreneurial spirit and everything that people were doing, it seemed like a good fit, and it was just kind of the path that I knew I wanted to continue on. And I feel like once you kind of get going down the path, it's kind of hard to backpedal and want to change industries.
Yeah, definitely. And then since there's so many people in the industry, how have you been able to set yourself apart, right? This path is not something that somebody expects. So you don't walk into a facility knowing exactly what your game plan is going to be. There is a creative process to it. How do you set yourself apart in now a very competitive space where you're working with brand new companies that have a lot of opinions?
Yeah, for me, I would say that it's it's always interesting meeting very different people. I've worked in a lot of different states and worked with different clients, so you always get different backgrounds. Out in Oklahoma right now, we don't really talk about politics and religion very often. Things like that. We kind of stick to what we're there trying to achieve. So you get to meet all kinds of different people, and it's just, it really shows you, like you're saying, there's just so many different ways to go. So if you're going to go into a facility or into any kind of job, I would say taking entry-level positions are always a great way. Get a foot in the door. It's maybe not going to be exactly where you want to be, but it gives you time to kind of figure that out. And I think it's also good just to take in the experience and really take in all the free knowledge that is around you, and then kind of shape your way into where you want to go and where you want to be.
Yeah, I love that.
I think for me, a lot of what sets me apart from a lot of the other people in the industry is my background. I was a logistics specialist in the Army, so everything to do with warehousing, and then obviously a degree in botany, which then gives me the plant side of everything, which a lot of people in the industry don't have. There's been a lot of growers that grow kind of crawled out of the underground, did the basement thing, never had any real education or in any fashion, whether it be in plant science or business. So those two things really have helped me along the ways. You know, whenever it comes to setting up a large scale industrial grow, there's a lot of logistics behind it, from day to day to the overall flow of the company in general. Everything from employees to crop rotation to overall management. So those, along with attention to detail and hard work, have set me apart from others. Being willing to be that guy that works 7 days a week for a year straight, where everybody else wants to, you know, put in their 9 to 5 and go home. Cultivation takes a lot of work. Plants don't take a day off, and sometimes you need that person that's not going to either. So I think a lot of that has set me apart from other people in the industry and allowed me to succeed where others haven't. Just that drive and motivation, and like I said, history and experience.
And just to touch on that, I would say for anybody that's listening that even if you don't have a degree or anything like that, any kind of background, there's so much free information out there on the internet. There is massive amounts of information that's free to go and learn. If you go and take that and do that in your free time and go work hard at a facility, the likelihood that you're going to move up quickly into a higher position is, you know, you can fast track that by, you know, showing your knowledge and, you know, learning from what you have, but also just taking in all the information. I mean, social media, especially like platforms like Instagram, everybody wants to show off their grow and everything that they're doing. There is so much information out there that you can take all of that and kind of build what you want from that, or take what you want. But it's quite insane how much free information we have these days, and how that can help shape you. And you can see what everybody's doing and where people have made mistakes and where they're improving, and paying attention to all the new technology in the industry and everything that's coming. Like, don't let it discourage you. Like, there's so much you can learn.
That's kind of the fun thing about working in our industry, that like you don't have to have a conventional path. You don't have to have the same path as someone else to still get in your groove and figure out what type of environment you want to work in, what environment you want to create, because, you know, growing plants is creating the entire environment that cannabis relies on. It is really the backbone of our industry. Everything revolves around that plant. So it's really interesting to hear the different perspectives and understand that there isn't a one size fit all approach. But since both of you guys mentioned that you're coming from different backgrounds, different paths, different trajectories, can you give some advice to people that are looking to break into the industry on the best way to get into the space, to grow in the space, and then learn in the space? I know you touched on social, but would love any more insight that you all have.
I would agree with what John said here a little bit ago. You know, be willing to take that entry level position. You know, get in on the ground floor, learn how things work, and grow from there. Too many people out there, I feel that, especially people that have at home grows or have grown in the underground or anything like that in the past, come into the industry thinking they know how to do everything. And when it comes to industrial size grows, it's a completely different beast. So be willing to step into that entry level position, keep your head down, ask questions, learn from everybody around you. Like I tell everybody all the time, you know, I'll learn something from somebody that just walked in off the street 3 months ago. It doesn't matter how long I've been doing this. You know, there's always somebody out there that has a different technique or a different pattern of thought on how to do things. So never be closed-minded, always be willing to listen and learn, no matter who you're talking to. Obviously filter out what some people are telling you, but, you know, never discredit somebody just because you don't think they have the experience that you do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I've learned a lot of things from just taking a little different perspective. You know, as cultivators, we get in there and we start doing things one way because we've done it for so long that sometimes you get, you know, tunnel vision and you don't notice something that somebody else does, which is huge. And then on top of that, I would say there's a lot of really good books out there. They're not even pertaining to marijuana specifically, but say like Leland was mentioning, you know, big production, like something as simple as the Toyota Way, you know, about manufacturing, any of that kind of process that you can improve what's going on in a big facility from that mindset. And then even just organic gardening books, like Jeff Lowenfeld is a really good author. He's got a bunch of different books, teaming with nutrients, teaming with microbes, teaming with fungi. Just a lot of good information out there, but also just to not have that one perspective, oh, I need to read just about this one plant. You can be thinking about the entire picture as well.
Well, and I like that you said that. I met him when, I don't remember, I think it was the fungi book that came out most recently, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It was when he was like pushing that a few years ago. And I went to an event with a cannabis company in Denver and they were having him speak. And it was really interesting because a lot of the growers that were listening were saying that they attributed their methodologies to actually learning about something that had nothing to do with cannabis. Understanding the ecosystem that a plant will really successfully grow in, understanding that living soil, like not just the benefits for the plant, but then benefits for the environment and how this is something that actually contributes to the long-term success of the plant that people are consuming. So I love that you said that. Looking at resources, obviously there are books and things when you're learning about the plant itself, but how about learning about the industry and how to transition into it? Do you have any advice on how to just figure out the first step, whether growing or not is the path that you want to go down?
Like I said, that entry level position at any type of cultivation kind of will give you that beginning education and understanding of how cultivation works. Get in there, be an assistant grower, learn how to take clones and skirt plants and everything from just potting plants and moving soil around and just getting a feel for it. A lot of people think that growing cannabis is an easy job, and they just don't realize, like we said, like other crops, it's farming. It's not just some weed you can throw in a little bit of dirt and come back in a month and then you're good. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So if you're thinking about getting into a cultivation career, like John said, there's lots of information. Everybody's always on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, showing you their grow and showing you what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And you can learn a lot about what people are doing. But really, the biggest way to do that is to get in there and get your hands dirty. And that a lot of times is just like an entry-level position and just doing it. Or talking to somebody that has done it, even if they're just an assistant grower themselves doing it for 6 months. Those people would go through the day-to-day motions and know, kind of the base level of what a cultivation is like. So, talk to people that do it. If you're, that interested past there, pick up an entry-level position if you're able to, and just see if it's a fit for you.
I think it's so interesting how many people, that we talk to, but I've also heard through different avenues, not realize how complex actually cultivating cannabis is. They almost think that it is like growing. They almost like growing a normal plant, right? They don't realize that there's compliance that goes into it. They don't realize that in every state that's going to look different. So John, if you're growing in Oklahoma, that's not going to be the same as Colorado and California. There's going to be things and complexities that come into play. Do you have any insight on the best way that people maybe coming from the traditional market can make that change into the regulated space successfully, since it is going to uproot, no pun intended, their entire process in some ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, if you're starting a new business or, coming to a new state, just getting familiar with the regulations and what that state requires. Like you said, Oklahoma is completely different. You can go burn your green waste out in the field if you want to. And, there's just not much compliance. There's, so many licenses out there. It's probably difficult to regulate at this point still. But, each market has a different regulation, that you're going to have to look out for. And, you really just need to be familiar with that, whether it's if you're starting a business, it's hiring somebody to, have a compliance role, or if somebody's after a compliance role, really understanding the regulations and, really kind of watching everything that you're doing. And from start to finish, it's important to not get dinged by, any of the regulatory boards, you'd like to keep your license. So it's very important, I would say.
Yeah. Leland, do you have anything to add there? I want to make sure I can include your thoughts.
Not a whole lot different. I mean, one thing to keep in mind on that same line is it's not always state to state that's different. Every county is different. Every city is different. If you go from Denver to Boulder, they're going to have different regulations and that you're going to have to learn and follow. So other than that, I think John hit the nail on the head.
Perfect. And since both of you have been in positions where you've hired a team, what type of qualities are you looking for in individuals, either if they come from cannabis or not? And is there any advice that you would give to them other than it's okay to start from the bottom, so that as they're looking, they can make sure that they're finding the right fit?
When it comes to growing cannabis, a lot of it is a team effort. So being able to work well with others is a great thing to have, or ability. Other than that, like I mentioned before, it's not an easy job. So be prepared to work hard and listen, absorb as much information as you can from everybody around you as you're learning, and just be willing to put in that hard work, because it does take a lot.
Yeah, depending on the size of the farm you're on, it really is a farming job. It can get monotonous at times where you're doing repetitive tasks, but it's pretty rewarding once you do, come to a final crop, and everybody's put everything that they can into it, and you guys get to all sample it, share it, do whatever with it. It's quite rewarding to see what your hands can do, and it takes a lot of hard work and takes dedication, and really, like Leland said, you got to be willing to put the time in, because if you don't put the time in, you're not going to be able to be successful.
Yeah, it's interesting when you hear people talk about what they're looking for in hiring for their roles, right? If you're looking at like the corporate level, somebody in finance, that's going to look completely different from a recruitment standpoint. They're going to be looking for maybe education. They're going to maybe looking for somebody who's very technical. All of these more like specific qualities, where I think a lot of times the benefit of growing in an entry-level role, regardless of if it's in any aspect of cannabis, but in this case, cultivation, is that you're actually forced to be present. You're actually forced to show up with who you are versus just a resume. When you all are hiring people for other roles, not entry level, what are you looking for in that sense? So let's say you're hiring somebody to oversee IPM, or let's say you're looking for somebody to oversee supply chain on the back end and help with production. Are there specific backgrounds that you're looking for outside of those entry level roles? And no need to stay focused just on those. Those are just some examples. But there may be some people listening that are already in cultivation but looking to grow in this space.
I would say when we're doing hiring and stuff, we're definitely looking for people that are detail oriented. There's a lot of small details, whether it's in the garden or post-production, or even in, somebody doing financial models. We really have to, pay attention to those small details and make sure we're not missing things. For us in the garden, when we're looking for cultivation managers or supervisors, we want those people that can also step into leadership roles and lead a team, delegate tasks, be able to also step back and be a manager, but also collect the data and be able to take a look at this data and make informed decisions, without us necessarily having to be looking over their shoulder the entire time. So those kind of things are definitely important, and things that we're looking for.
And on that note, I highly agree with the attention to detail, especially when it comes to management positions or even mid-level supervisor positions in this industry. As we touched on a little bit ago, there's so many different regulations that we have to follow, that if your mid-level supervisors, managers aren't paying attention to something as simple as a tag number on a plant, you can get in trouble for that stuff. You mentioned IPM, someone that you would hire even if they're not a supervisor, but just doing your pest management. We have to follow all the regulations of the Department of Agriculture, all the way down to the recording of all that, and mixing all of our pesticides correctly to the and even everything down to knowing the REIs for each of those pesticides to warn your team, hey, you got 12 hours before you can go in this room again. If you don't have somebody detail oriented and that's paying attention to all of that, you can get your company into trouble. But as well, as far as management goes, I like to make sure that anybody that I put in any position, whether it be entry level or supervisor level, is willing to do whatever is needed on that day. I'm not a big fan of managers that think that they don't need to sweep a floor because they have employees. I'd rather have somebody that's going to grab a broom and do it because it needs to get done, or they're willing to jump in the pit with anybody and do anything anybody else there is doing. So that willingness to be a team player, to be part of the team, is highly advantageous when it comes to this industry, because it is such a hard work. And a lot of companies go through periods of not having enough people to staff their grows and stuff like that, running shorthanded. So if you don't have a manager or a supervisor that's willing to jump in there and do the grunt work with everybody else, then I don't think they should need to be there. So definitely need good team players as far as that stuff goes. And like John said, high attention to detail is highly important.
I feel like that's cannabis in general. Like if you are not comfortable doing the things that are not in a job description to do what's right for the team, it's not going to end up being a long-term fit, because we're all startups. It doesn't matter if you're a startup that's been here for 10 years or a startup that's been here for 10 days. Everybody should be doing it. Everybody should be contributing in the ways, and it shouldn't be something that feels so unnatural. It should feel natural to want to do what's best for the team.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. So for people that maybe are in a facility right now working and are considering a change, a question that we get quite a bit is how to navigate that change when they feel like they have a lot of opinions. So let's say somebody is going from one team to another. There's clearly going to be a lot of methodologies that are different, maybe some that are the same. How would you recommend somebody transition into that space? Do you have any advice on how to stay open-minded? And then do you have any advice on top of that on how somebody can get into a position where they're able to actually affect that change versus sit back?
As far as I'm concerned, I've been in that position multiple times, going to work for a new company, different owner, or, in the earlier days, different head growers. And at that time, a lot of people don't like to hire people with a lot of experience in growing, because a lot of the troubles you have with them is retraining them, getting people to do stuff the way that you're doing it. As far as methodology, when it comes to growing cannabis, there's undefined different amount of ways to do certain things, but everybody likes to do things their own way, and every company has different SOPs for the way things are done. So I'd say anybody in that type of position, go into it with an open mind. If you're going to take a new position, keep your opinions to yourself a little bit from the start and learn how they do things. Just because you walk in and think they're doing something completely wrong doesn't mean they are. I mean, it works for them, their methodology. You don't know how the overall SOP runs in that company. There's certain nuances to each method that need to be done that don't work in other things. Learn how everything, for the most part, at least a broad overview of how things function and how things work, and ask questions. If you don't understand why they're doing something a certain way and you feel like you have a thought of it being done differently, don't go in there and go, hey, you should be doing it this way. They're going to look at you like, hey, there's the door. This is the way we do things. Ask questions, ask why they're doing it that way. Just gain a base knowledge. And when I say that, don't be afraid to let them know that you have experience, that you understand how things work, but don't try and change things on your first day.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. You come in and want to change everything, it's probably going to piss off that head grower or whoever it is, because he feels like you're being disrespectful to him. You haven't given it enough time to like see the system and how it's working. And just like Leland said, just because you did it some different way at a different facility doesn't mean it works in every facility that way. So being open-minded and, you know, giving it a little bit of time before you make your suggestions, you know, I think is kind of the right thing to do out of respect. And, you know, I would say also just, you know, keep a log, you know, a grow diary of kind of what's going on too. And, you know, even if you have that from a previous grow, it's always good just to collect that data so that you always have something to go back to and something to compare to.
And also on another note on that subject, if you're stepping into a higher level position, say head grower, operations manager, director of cultivation, anything on a higher level like that in an established company, say they have a team that's been working there for years and they all work well together and they're used to a certain methodology, I would recommend not walking in there and trying to change how they're doing things right off the bat either. Learn how they're doing things, how the facility functions, and adapt a little bit to that before you try and make changes. Obviously, a lot of times whenever it comes to people replacing their head grower, their director of cultivation and stuff like that, the company's expecting a change. Usually there's something going wrong. Sometimes they might have just lost that person, they moved to a different position or something like that. But a lot of times a company is looking to make changes. But if you don't understand how the system works, then you don't know how to effectively change it without doing 100% overhaul, which in a functioning cultivation facility, trying to make a 100% turnaround change is not feasible. You got to get in there and make small changes over time, figure out what's wrong, figure out how to fix it, and then spend the time implementing that. So if you are going into those higher level positions, don't think you're going to go in there and change it on day one. Learn what's going on first. Otherwise, you're not going to know how to fix it.
How do you feel like you've been able to navigate that to leadership? Because I mean, I know on our end, when we're talking to a company who is looking for that major change, sometimes they're not that understanding about the investment that they need to make to actually get there. It's a plant. You can't just plug and play. It has a life cycle. How do you guys recommend, or what have you found is a positive way to go about that? Because you're dealing with the egos of people that maybe don't understand how the plant works, and they're just expecting immediate change.
It's a day-to-day struggle. Just getting, especially like kind of in that instance, that's when you have, say, investors that are purchasing a company or something like that. They have no background knowledge of the industry or how anything functions, and just getting people to understand that when it comes to cultivation, you know, you don't just bring a new strain in and have it on your shelves in a month. You got to go through the entire process, and that goes all the way back down to either setting up a new facility, a new grow facility. Just because you open the doors in January doesn't mean you're going to have product on your shelves in February. You got to, it's farming. You know, you got to put those seeds in the ground, give it time to grow, go through the entire steps. And it has been a challenge in a lot of ways in my history, getting people to understand that, you know, you're not going to have production right off the bat. You have to put the investment behind the people, the workers, the time, the facility, and wait for that to come to fruition. It's a struggle, but if you've done it enough and you explain it to people from the bat before they even get started, at least then they go into it having some type of perception that, hey, you know, this is going to take a while. And that also, whenever you're trying to affect change within a company, it's the same thing. You know, if you're bringing in new genetics, changing up your nutrient formula, changing your lights, anything like that, you know, you're talking to, it's a process. So always be upfront with any type of ownership, management, anything like that doesn't understand the industry. And there's a lot of people out there like that. Really, it's just continually reminding them, especially if they don't understand from the start, that it is a process and it does take a while.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to get that through to investors and people that are, looking at money all the time and financial sheets. So just being realistic about the timeline, and if it's a 3 to 6 month project or longer, just as long as they're prepped for that, I think most businesses can handle it. They just need to be aware of the timeline of these things. And like Leland says, bringing in a new head grower or something like that, that's 6 months to a year of change and time. And he's going to come in and make his changes, but like Leland said, also making slow changes, so what effect your changes had. If you try to come in and change 10 things at once and then you don't get to your outcome because you made too many changes, then you're also in a pickle. So it's being patient, taking time, and being realistic about the time to turn something around.
Well, I think you have to be in a position where you are confident enough in where you are to walk into that situation. Like, you can't oversell that experience, because part of being successful in that switch is going to force you to understand all different types of methodologies and all different types of ways to get to the final outcome. Not just from a plant touching standpoint, but also like a corporate standpoint, how to navigate those waters. So I definitely think that it's interesting to hear that you have similar sentiments when it comes to it, and just, you have to set that tone with the company. You have to let them know that it's not going to be an immediate change. If it was an immediate change, you wouldn't be doing something right.
Correct.
Yeah. How did you guys end up finding your groove in cannabis then? Because like we mentioned, just to be in that situation where you could advise and say, this is what is actually not terrible that you're doing currently, and this is how to optimize what needs to be done. How did you find that groove throughout the years of what really worked best and how to be intuitive with the plant?
I don't know if you ever actually fully find that groove. Every day is a struggle. Everything changes on a day-to-day basis. Everything from genetics to the way we feed plants, automation, lighting structures, everything like that. So you'll never fully get into a full groove. But on that same note, you do start to develop your own style and how to do things and what works and what doesn't. A lot of it's just experience. In doing it. I know I've learned a lot from certain mentors over the years, people I've worked with, worked for, and stuff like that. I was always, in my beginning days, I considered myself a connoisseur grower, which in this kind of upscale industry, unless you're in that little niche company that's like, hey, we're growing the best stuff out there, it's not going to survive. Versus, the facilities out there that are trying to put out as much weight as humanly possible to make as much money as possible, because half your purchasers out there aren't really concerned with having a 10 out of 10 flower versus an 8 out of 10. They'll take the 8 out of 10 all day long because it's still good flower at a cheaper price. So, you got to learn to grow as far as quantity. So my niche over the last 8 years in the industrial side of things has been trying to figure out how to blend those together and grow good quality product at the same time putting out high quality numbers. And it just took time and learning and trying different methods, and a lot of that's been working with other people, seeing how they do things, having the ability to go into different facilities, different grows of friends that I've had doing consulting for people in different grows is a good way. Just being able to walk into somebody else's grow and see what they're doing and being able to adapt certain things that you might say, hey, that was a good idea. I'm going to implement that into how I'm doing things. So like I said, it's a long process, and I don't think it ever ends for those of us that are in this for the long haul. It's a day-to-day process, but like I said, experience, listening to others, learning from others, and that's about it.
Yeah, to touch on what Leland's saying, it's all about, being adaptable, being able to change. There's going to be days when you go in and you're not sure why this happened and you weren't expecting this, but through experience, you learn to, kind of how to manage those emotions that you feel as you are dealing with living things. And, you feel really close to these plants. And if something goes bad, you feel bad, but that's part of being adaptable. And the more you grow and the more you learn, you figure out how to avoid these issues and how to correct them. And, for me, it's attention to detail. It's collecting data, being able to come back to data previously and say, hey, this was working, this is not working. How can we improve this? And like Leland said, I think it's going to be continuous for me as well, to where I'm always, tweaking and turning knobs, trying to, dial in this new environment. Out in Oklahoma, it's a completely different beast than Colorado. We have high temperature and high humidity in Oklahoma, where it's in Colorado, it's hot and dry, so it's getting used to, dialing your environment in with your equipment the best you can. And then everything that you control, whether it's your irrigation, your plant pruning techniques, any of that, as long as you continue to log that data, you're going to be learning, and you're going to be able to have a repeatable process that you can continue to work on and twist and turn those knobs until, things fit for you. And just like Leland said, still learning from other people and, implementing those into your own facility. And just, it's always going to be a grind, but to really get to that point, you got to just keep working at it, keep going, keep pushing.
Touch on a little something that John just said there as far as environments in different places. Like he just said, growing here in Colorado is a completely different environment than growing out in Oklahoma. And on that same aspect, growing in one building in Denver is different from growing in another building in Denver. Like a lot of times you can't take the same methodology from one facility and go to another facility and have it work 100%. You got to figure out that environment, those, environmental controls, your feeding system, your genetics, your just overall, your sea level makes a difference. I know I moved out here from Oregon and I was growing out there where it's a temperate rainforest. Yeah. I didn't even know what a humidity dome for clones was until I first 5 clone trays died here in Colorado because I didn't want to put one on. I was used to having 60+% humidity and atmosphere. So just beware that everywhere you grow is going to be different, and you've got to be able to adapt to that specific environment. So it goes into, developing that methodology. Have your base methodology, decide, how you like to do things, but like John said, collect data. If you don't have data to go back and reference, then you're flying by the seat of your pants on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And I think when you're going through that, something that you had mentioned is understanding that you can't replicate an environment, because when you're in that headspace all the time, that's actually something that sets you up for success in cannabis, because if you can't get too comfortable, you can't just say, this is something that I did once and I could do it again. It's almost forcing you to be in a situation where you're constantly improving yourself, because there is no area of comfort per se. There's a new challenge that will continue coming up. So looking at that, I saw a question come in from Greta. What have you learned from your biggest mistake in growing? I feel like this is a tangent that's leading us there. Have you had a mistake that has really shaped where you are now? Or a piece of, or just seeing a mistake that somebody else has done that has taught you to really hone in on your craft?
Never get comfortable with automation. In this day and age, when it comes to anything, we're relying on computer systems, technology, and everything like that, and we get relying on it. And as soon as that technology goes down, if you're not paying attention, then you're going to have problems. Like whenever, I first got in this industry, everybody was still hand watering all their plants. And over the years, automated feed systems, drip lines, flood and drain systems, and all of that have become more prevalent. And one of my first experience when dealing with drip feed systems was, if you're not running good filtration on those systems, and you're not paying attention and just thinking, hey, all these drippers, every plant's getting auto fed, so we're good. And then you keep thinking that until the day you walk in and 10% of your garden's dead because it hasn't been watered in 3 days and nobody physically checked anything. So that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made in growing in this industry, is just never take your eyes off of things. Doesn't matter if it's automated, doesn't matter if your employees are supposed to be doing something. If you're in charge of stuff, don't leave it to somebody else. Always double check everything and go behind, because if you do just rely on automation and computers to do stuff for you, it'll turn around and bite you.
Yeah, agreed. Had a recent experience with some cultivators under myself as well, who just left the irrigation running to the point where they overwatered the plants, and it decreased our yield because they were not paying attention to the environment and our higher humidity levels, or our plants were not transpiring as quickly. And, they just thought that they could set it and forget it, which, taking the eye off of that is leading to obviously more costly effects down the line, which are, something that we have to explain to our clients and stuff, and why that happens. So it's never fun when things like that happen. I'd say one of my larger mistakes is that I also, I made the mistake of listening to a pesticide company about an application on how to apply a pesticide to one of our mediums, and ended up stripping my medium. And this was probably 6-7 years ago, which ended up throwing off our pH in our media, which means that our plants cannot uptake nutrients anymore because I could not get the pH stable, because it's been basically, the buffer was stripped in our media, and that caused issues with uptake and eventually led to, a big yield issue, which I knew better because I'd never done it that way, but I took advice from, somebody that I trusted in the industry, and I did not think it through, and it was a big mistake. So I would just say it's very important, even if somebody, a rep, sales rep, anything like that tells you something, still always, you want to double check that what they're telling you is correct, because kind of like what Kelsey said, no matter what, everybody's still in startup. We still don't know everything. And, granted, somebody might be in sales and they might work for some big company and tell you something, they could totally give you misinformation that could completely screw up one of your crops and cost your company a lot of money. So I would say just make sure that every action that you're doing is well thought out and not just kind of shooting from the hip.
So in that example, is there a way that you could have tested it in a safer way versus really just doing like, let's just implement this process? So like
somebody, a couple plants instead of, all of the plants. So
yeah,
that's usually the better way to go about it.
Yeah, seems like it. So if somebody's in that position, maybe just start small instead of creating a process around something you haven't tried.
Correct. Yeah.
On that note, in any change, that's the way you should do it. If you're trying to try out a new nutrient, a new pesticide, a new genetic, never make a full change. Always do a test run before making any major changes in your garden, because it can come back to bite you. And that's been mistakes that I've made as well. Talking to a rep, and this new nutrient line is supposed to, produce the same amount of production and quality and everything else. And you're like, okay. And then you switch your entire garden over to it. Next thing you know, you walk in and your entire bedroom is yellow, and you spend another month trying to get your veg back to where to the health that it was, just because you listened to some nutrient rep who's just out there trying to sell their product. A lot of those reps don't even know cannabis. They don't know growing. All they are half the time, not saying none of them know what they're talking about. Don't get me wrong on that. There are a lot of knowledgeable reps out there in the industry these days, but some of them don't. So whenever it comes to anything like that, different pesticides, different nutrients, as John mentioned earlier, everybody's putting everything online these days. If you want to know what this new pesticide does, if it works on, is this going to kill the russet mites on my plant, or what have you. Jump on a Google search, pull up 10 different forums that somebody's talking about using it. Either it worked for them, it fried their plants, it killed their plants, or it didn't do anything. So there's lots of knowledge out there. Don't just trust one person to tell you how to do things. Just do a little research first. And then, as John said, start small.
Yeah, have a control group.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think it's interesting that you mentioned forum. We just really started building out our version of that, since we have so many people in our network that are constantly asking us questions. So I'll have to get you guys included in the conversation there so you can start answering those a bit. I feel like your insights would be really beneficial.
For sure.
Yeah, awesome.
So as we're wrapping time, I've seen a few questions come in, and hopefully through the dialogue, those have been answered. Want to just really end the dialogue with any sage pieces of wisdom and advice that you have for those that really are ready to start. I know we talked about getting in at the ground level, finding the right type of team, but is there anything that maybe we haven't covered that you would think would be really helpful for those that are either about to start growing in the industry for the first time, or actually growing in their career in cultivation since they've been doing it for a few years now?
Especially entry-level people, figure out what's going in your state and your area first, whether you need to be licensed, how to do that, how to get into it. I know whenever I first tried to get into this industry, I didn't even realize that people needed a badge. So like I was going to different companies trying to drop off resumes, and they're like, do you have a badge? And I'm like, what is that? So learn how things work in your area before you try and get into it. If there's paperwork, background checks, filing fees, all of that, just be aware of that before you try and get into it. Otherwise, if you're interested in it, try it. You'll never know unless if you get in there and do it.
Yeah, I would say, do some research, like Leland's saying. If there's any companies that you're, into, definitely do some research, reach out to them, send an email to their, whatever their contact is on their website, if they don't have a careers page or anything like that. Or even if they do and they don't have anything listed, it's always a good idea just to go ahead and send a resume or try to kind of gain some interest. And then obviously always, talking with a recruitment company like Banks is always a good idea. They are obviously working with a lot of other companies. So I would just say keep looking and pushing and doing your research, and eventually something will pop up that fits your needs.
And then on the other side of that, I think Kelsey mentioned, if you're a higher up lead grower, head grower, thinking about advancing your career, moving to the next step, just keep in mind what that position requires. For one, it's not an easy life being a head grower. Sometimes if you're in there 7 days a week trying to keep things going, you lose a person, you have to pick up the slack. Just be aware what you're getting into. But at the same time, if it's something you're passionate about and something that you want, go for it. Just get out there and give it a try. That's all we can do. Either if you've made it to the point that you're considering a position for a head grower, then most likely then you'll do pretty good at it.
Yeah, love that. Are either of you in a position where you're hiring right now? If so, for what roles, and how could these people get in touch with you? Should they look at websites? Is there someone that they could reach out to directly?
So we may be hiring for a facility in Colorado that's going to be coming up in the fall. So it's on the western slope. Can't really speak too much more about it, but if anybody wants to email me, it's John, just Jon, at nextbigcrop.com.
We're currently hiring entry-level position processors and harvesters. We got a couple entry-level positions opened. I think we currently have a couple listings up on Indeed. Otherwise, can drop a line at our info at our website, www.qualis-cultivation.com. It's a mouthful. Qualis, Qualis-cultivation. throw us a line on there if you're interested, or just check out Indeed and look for, we're opening, our positions are open in Boulder, Colorado currently.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. I genuinely appreciate your time. I hope everybody had a wonderful session that was listening in. We'll be sending this out to our network